She was 36 years old. She had built $1 million company from her father's name and her own relentless work. She was generous, she was loved, and she had never in her life given anyone a reason to hurt her. And on the night of September 14th, the man she called her husband walked her to the edge of a river, placed both hands on her back, and pushed her in. He went back to the cabin, poured himself a drink, and waited for the silence. But 40 minutes south of that river, a phone rang in a darkened apartment across Atlanta, and the woman who answered had been waiting for that call for 2 years. Not because she feared it would come, because she had known, with the quiet and certain knowledge that only a twin sister carries, that it was always going to come. On the night of September 14th, Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the Chattahoochee River, calling his wife's name. He told the sheriff's deputies he had tried to save her. He told her family he was completely devastated. He told the cameras he could not explain how any of this had happened. He performed his grief on that riverbank with wet clothes and a shaking voice, and the expression of a man who had rehearsed this moment many times in his own mind. But 40 minutes south, in a trauma bay, at a hospital where no one knew his name, Simone Carter-Webb was fighting to stay alive. And the woman sitting beside her, holding her hand through the partition glass, had already made a decision that Marcus Webb, in all his careful planning, had never once thought to prepare for. This is that story. Stay with me from the beginning to the end, because what happened next is something you will not forget. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And do not forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Atlanta, Georgia has always been more than a city. It is a declaration written in glass and history, rising from red Georgia clay into one of the most powerful black economies in the United States. They call it the Black Mecca for a reason. From Sweet Auburn Avenue to the million-dollar estates of Buckhead, from the hallways of Spelman and Morehouse to the boardrooms of some of the nation's largest black-owned enterprises, Atlanta has always been the city where black ambition does not only survive, but builds something lasting. And at the center of that world, living quietly and with steady purpose, were women like Simone Carter-Webb, women who had earned every inch of what they owned, women who carried their family's legacy forward without complaint and without recognition, women who, in the wrong hands, became targets. Because in Atlanta, wealth and loyalty are not always traveling in the same direction. Simone Carter was born the second of 2 daughters to Raymond and Gloria Carter, founders of Carter Legacy Properties, a black-owned real estate firm that Raymond had built from nothing over 30 years of disciplined and unrelenting work. Raymond Carter was the kind of man Atlanta produces once in a generation. Visionary, principled, and deeply convinced that black wealth, once built, must be guarded and passed down with intention. He raised both his daughters to understand that the greatest threat to a black family's legacy was never the world beyond the front door. It was the wrong person allowed inside the house. Simone was his younger daughter by exactly 4 minutes. The twin who arrived second, the one who from her earliest years moved through the world as though it were full of friends she had not yet introduced herself to. She trusted openly. She loved completely. And she had no way of knowing that those 2 qualities, the finest things about her, would one day make her the most vulnerable person in the room. By the time Simone reached her mid-30s, she had grown Carter Legacy Properties into one of the most respected, black-owned real estate operations in the Atlanta metro area. She expanded into commercial contracts, secured 3 major development deals, and grew the company's annual revenue by 40% in her first 2 years of full operational control. Her mother Gloria often said that watching Simone run the company was like watching her father walk back through the door, and that was the highest compliment Gloria Carter had ever learned to give. Simone owned a 4-bedroom home in Buckhead, drove a black Mercedes G-Lee, and quietly donated to her church's youth housing initiative every single year without announcement or recognition. Her accountants placed her net worth between $1.8 and $2.2 million, and the man she had married 18 months earlier understood that number better than anyone else in her life. Better, perhaps, than Simone did herself. Marcus Webb walked into Simone Carter's life at a National Urban League charity gala held at the Merit Marquis in downtown Atlanta in the spring of 2019. He was 38 years old, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the kind of easy confidence that fills a room before a man has spoken a single word. He called himself a real estate development consultant, a title constructed to suggest substance in the absence of it. The true record of Marcus Webb showed a man who had walked away from 4 failed business ventures in 6 years, carried outstanding debt with 2 former partners, and held an unresolved civil judgment from a failed development deal in southwest Atlanta. Everyone who had worked closely with him described the same consistent pattern. He moved toward money he had not earned and positioned himself inside lives he had not built. The gala was simply his next position. He approached Simone at the cocktail hour, with a glass of Merlot and a story about a development project he was planning in South Atlanta. Simone found him interesting, and what appeared to be genuine ambition attractive. What she could not have known was that the project existed only inside the conversation, and that the only real asset Marcus Webb had identified that evening was standing across from him in a black evening gown. The courtship that followed was swift and deliberate. Within 3 months, he had met Gloria Carter, attended 2 Sunday services at Simone's church, and integrated himself into her social circle with a precision that, in hindsight, told the whole story before anyone was reading it. He brought flowers. He remembered details. He showed up consistently and made Simone feel that being truly known was the same as being truly chosen. And Simone Carter, who had spent 3 years focused entirely on her company and quietly grieving her father, found in Marcus exactly what she had convinced herself she was not looking for. The proposal came 11 months after the gala, when Simone raised the subject of a prenuptial agreement, citing her attorney's advice and the legal structure of Carter Legacy Properties. Marcus responded not with argument, but with tears. He told her a prenuptial agreement felt like a declaration that she did not believe the marriage would survive. He told her it would follow him through their entire life together, like a permanent question mark over his integrity. He told her he loved her too much to begin their marriage under those terms. Simone removed the prenuptial agreement from the wedding plans. She did not tell Serena. Serena found out 2 days after the wedding through a passing comment their mother made, assuming Serena already knew. Serena said nothing in response. She drove home, sat at her kitchen table, and made a phone call. The call went to Raymond Brooks, a private investigator Serena had worked with twice before on Carter family business matters. Ray Brooks was a 44-year-old former Fulton County Sheriff's investigator. Methodical, patient, the kind of man who treats a long surveillance assignment as a form of very careful reading. Serena told him exactly what she needed: consistent and ongoing coverage of Marcus Webb, his movements, his contacts, his patterns, his financial behavior, wherever accessible. Ray quoted his rate. Serena agreed without negotiating. Before she ended the call, she said one more thing. She said, "I do not know exactly what you will find, but I know you will find something." Ray told her he would get started. He started within the hour. Keisha Monroe had been the fixed third point in Simone Carter's world since the 9th grade at Westlake High School in southwest Atlanta, the kind of best friend who appears in every significant photograph, who knows the backstory behind every important decision, who holds the things you do not say out loud to anyone else. She was maid of honor at the wedding. She was the first call when Simone needed to work through a hard business choice. She was the voice on the phone at midnight when Simone could not settle. In every public and private dimension of Simone Carter-Webb's life, Keisha Monroe occupied the space just beside her shoulder. And yet, Ray Brooks flagged her name in his third month of surveillance, not because of anything sudden or dramatic, but because of a pattern he could not explain away. Marcus and Keisha were communicating well outside the boundaries of their stated relationship. A text at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. A call lasting 47 minutes while Simone attended a business dinner across town. Small things. But Ray Brooks had learned across 2 decades of investigative work that small things are never simply small. They are the story before the story reveals itself. Over the following year, Ray compiled a record of the communication between Marcus Webb and Keisha Monroe that told a clear and deeply damaging story. The text messages, recovered through legal process after the fact and admitted as trial evidence, showed a relationship that had moved well beyond friendship by the late spring of 2021. More significant than the personal dimension was the content of their conversations about money. Beginning in the summer of 2021, Marcus had started discussing Simone's financial situation with Keisha in terms that had no reasonable, innocent explanation. He referenced the real estate portfolio by specific figures. He referenced the investment accounts. He used the phrase, the situation, repeatedly, without ever naming it directly. Keisha never introduced discomfort into those exchanges. She never spoke her best friend's name in those conversations with anything that sounded like protection or concern. What two people said to each other over months of coded and careful communication was described by the prosecution at trial in one sentence. They planned it together, and they believed with complete certainty that no one would ever hear them. The idea for the private vacation was Keisha's. She sent Simone a text message in August of 2022 that the prosecution entered as People's Exhibit 14 at trial. It read, "Girl, you and Marcus need a reset. Find somewhere quiet, no work, no phones, just you two. You have been going non-stop since February. You deserve it." Simone read it and felt genuinely grateful. She forwarded it to Marcus with the note, "Your best friend is my new favorite person." Marcus replied with a heart emoji. Within 48 hours, he had booked a private cabin rental near the banks of the Chattahoochee River, approximately 30 miles north of Atlanta, in a stretch of the riverway that was remote, poorly lit, and well beyond the edge of any residential development. He paid cash and booked under a name that was not his own. He had identified the specific section of the river 6 weeks before Keisha sent that text to Simone. The vacation was not spontaneous. It was the final step in something that had been building for a long time. Serena learned about the trip on a Sunday phone call 2 weeks before September 14th. Simone mentioned it lightly, with real anticipation in her voice. Serena kept herself steady. She asked where the cabin was located, how remote, whether Marcus had arranged all the details himself. When she ended the call, she reached Ray Brooks within 60 seconds. She told him the date, everything she knew about the location, and that she needed him close to the water before Marcus and Simone arrived. Ray asked what she was expecting. Serena was quiet before she answered. She said, "I do not know exactly, but I need someone close to my sister. Whatever happens on that trip, I need someone near her." Ray was already in position when Marcus and Simone turned off the interstate. He had identified his sight lines and activated his equipment before their car appeared on the access road. September 14th arrived under a warm, early autumn sky. Simone packed a weekend bag, told her assistant she was unreachable until Monday, and left the Buckhead house holding Marcus's hand. She had not taken a full weekend from the company in 8 months, and she was genuinely looking forward to the water and the quiet. Marcus drove north on I-75 with the radio low and his hand resting on her knee at every red light, attentive and unhurried. He stopped at a roadside stand and bought her Georgia peaches from an elderly man whose family had worked that same stretch of road for 4 decades. Simone ate one in the car and laughed at the juice running down her wrist, and the laugh was real and warm and entirely her own. She had no reason to believe this day was anything other than what she had been told it was. And somewhere on that same highway behind them, Ray Brooks drove with his camera equipment in the back seat and his full attention fixed on the road ahead. At 9:41 p.m., Marcus Webb suggested a walk to the river. Simone grabbed the light jacket she had folded over the porch railing and followed him down the path through the Georgia pines toward the water. The river was high from 2 days of upstream rain, fast in the center channel, and deceptively still at the bank. The kind of still that gives no warning and has no bottom you can trust. Ray moved through the tree line in parallel, closing the distance with the camera active, one hand steadying the lens and the other pushing quietly through low brush. Marcus walked with his arm around Simone's shoulder. At the bank, Simone stopped and looked out across the water the way you look when something is genuinely beautiful and you want to stay inside the moment. She turned her face slightly toward the river's surface, and at 9:47 p.m., captured in clear, time-stamped, GPS-anchored footage, Marcus Webb placed both of his hands flat against his wife's backpack and pushed her into the Chattahoochee River. Ray was already running before Simone hit the water. He cleared the tree line, shouting, and Marcus heard him. Marcus turned. For one fraction of a second, visible in the recording, he looked directly into the camera lens. Then he turned away from the river and walked back up the path toward the cabin. He did not run. He did not call out. He did not look back once. Ray dropped the still recording camera on the bank and went in after Simone, pulling her from the current 15 feet downstream from where she had entered the water. She was unconscious. He carried her to the far bank away from the cabin side, recovered the camera, and moved her through the trees to his truck. He logged the time at 9:51 p.m. Marcus Webb was back inside the cabin before the truck engine turned over. Ray drove 42 minutes to Wellstar North Fulton Hospital without calling 911. He had resolved this decision in advance. If local first responders were called, Marcus would be notified within the hour and would have time to shape his account before anyone knew the footage existed. So Ray drove, called Serena at 9:59 p.m., and told her what had happened in 4 sentences. Serena was in her car before he finished the third. Meanwhile, at 11:22 p.m., Marcus Webb called the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office and reported his wife missing, stating she had slipped on the wet bank during their walk. He was crying when deputies arrived. He stood at the water's edge in clothing a responding deputy noted and documented as re-wetted rather than genuinely soaked, and he called Simone's name into the darkness with the practiced desperation of a man who had rehearsed this performance and knew exactly how it needed to appear to every person watching him. Serena arrived at the hospital at 11:43 p.m. Ray handed her the camera, and she watched the footage in the corridor without speaking. At 2:15 a.m., the attending physician told her that Simone had sustained severe hypoxic brain injury. The oxygen loss had extended beyond the window of recovery. Serena sat with her sister through the partition glass and talked to her the way twins talk, in the register that lives beneath language, in the space between two people who have shared everything since before either had words for any of it. At 4:22 in the morning on September 15th, the monitor drew a long and final line. Simone Carter-Webb was 36 years old. The man who had killed her was asleep in a hotel 40 miles north, preparing his grief for the morning cameras. Serena sat in that hospital parking lot until the sky turned light. And when she finally moved, she knew exactly what she was going to do. Simone Carter-Webb was buried on September 16th in the Carter family plot at Westview Cemetery, beside her father and her grandparents, under an autumn sky gone gray with warm Georgia rain. The service lasted 11 minutes and was attended only by Serena Carter, Ray Brooks, and the funeral director who had handled both of her parents' arrangements. A man who understood the kind of discretion that old Atlanta families sometimes require. There was no obituary. There was no public announcement. As far as Marcus Webb understood, Simone remained a missing person whose body had not been recovered from the Chattahoochee River. That same night, Serena sat at her kitchen table with Ray Brooks and a legal pad and went through everything. The footage, 2 years of surveillance records, the documented communication between Marcus and Keisha, and the full inventory of Simone's assets. By 3 in the morning, the picture was complete. Serena picked up a pen and wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Do it right. Simone and Serena Carter were identical in every measurable physical detail. Same height at 5'6", same dark eyes, same full mouth, the same voice that had fooled their own mother on the telephone, more times than either of them could count. Simone pressed her hair straight while Serena wore hers natural, and Simone carried a small scar on her inner left wrist from a childhood bicycle accident at age 9. Serena began applying full coverage foundation to her own inner left wrist the morning after the burial. She bought a professional flat iron. She studied Simone's stride, her gestures, the way she tilted her head when listening closely to someone. She reviewed every text message Marcus had sent Simone in the previous 6 months and absorbed his patterns, his language, his moods, and his expectations. She studied her sister's face in the mirror until she could see no difference at all. Then she packed a bag and drove to Buckhead. Marcus Webb pulled into the driveway of the Buckhead house at 4:43 p.m. on September 17th, having spent the previous 2 days managing calls with investigators and family from a nearby hotel. He opened the front door, dropped his overnight bag, and reached for the entryway lamp, and Serena Carter, sitting in her sister's armchair in the low afternoon light, with Simone's perfume on her wrist, and Simone's hair pressed straight over her shoulders, looked up at him and said, "Baby, I am home." The sound that came out of Marcus Webb was not a word. It was something that lives below words in the part of a person that knows. It is confronting something that cannot be true. His face lost all its color. He took 3 steps toward her and stopped completely. His hands were shaking. His eyes moved over her face with the urgent quality of a man checking a calculation he knows has gone terribly wrong. And Serena looked at him steadily, with her sister's patience, and waited. He asked her, barely holding his voice together, how she was alive. Serena told him she had caught a route near the bank before the current took her, that a passing driver had brought her to an urgent care clinic, that she had been disoriented and unable to reach anyone for nearly 2 days, and that she had come straight home because home was where she needed to be. Every word was a deliberate construction. Every sentence was a test, and Marcus Webb failed every single one by accepting the story completely, because accepting it was the only option that did not require him to explain why news of his wife's survival should have destroyed him. He crossed the room and held her. Over the 11 days that followed, Serena accessed Carter Legacy Properties through the internal portal, working with the family attorney to restructure the estate holdings. The real estate portfolio, the investment accounts, and the property deeds were all moved into legal entities that Marcus had no knowledge of and no access to. In the second week, Serena presented Marcus with what she described as a routine estate update, a voluntary transfer of interest agreement that quietly removed him from every legal claim he held over Simone's estate. The language was dense and technical, designed for someone paying careful attention. Marcus Webb was not paying careful attention. He was sitting across from a woman he believed was his wife, entirely consumed by the impossible situation in front of him. He signed in 3 places, initialed in 2 more, and handed the pen back with a small joke about lawyers. Serena smiled her sister's smile and filed the documents that afternoon. Before he finished his dinner, Marcus Webb's legal claim on the Carter estate had ceased to exist entirely. Throughout those 3 weeks, Ray Brooks delivered daily intelligence from outside the property. Marcus had called Keisha Monroe 17 times in the 6 days following Serena's return to the house. The calls were short, and the tone Ray captured through directional equipment was unmistakably panicked. In one exchange partially transcribed for the prosecution, Marcus could be heard saying, "I do not understand how this is possible," and in a later call, Just stay quiet. I am handling it. Keisha's phone records revealed something equally telling. In the 48 hours following Simone's supposed return, she had conducted 3 separate internet searches. All of them the same question asked, in different words. Can an identical twin deceive someone who knows the original person well? 2 people who believed they had planned everything were quietly coming undone. On the evening of October 7th, Serena made 4 phone calls to WSB-TV, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Fox 5 Atlanta, and the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. To the district attorney, she transmitted a complete digital package within the hour. Ray's original footage with GPS coordinates and timestamp, 2 years of financial surveillance records. The full-text documentation between Marcus and Keisha, the signed transfer documents, and a written account of every event from September 14th to October 7th. She copied the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office on everything. October 8th arrived clear and cold over Atlanta. At 10 a.m., Serena Carter stood on the front steps of the Carter Legacy Properties offices on Peachtree Street, wearing her hair natural as herself as Serena for the first time in 3 weeks, and she spoke without notes. She told them about Raymond Carter and the legacy he spent his life building. She told them about Simone, and then she told them everything. When Serena finished, a technician played Ray's footage on the screen set up on the front steps of Peachtree Street. It ran for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. It showed Marcus Webb walking Simone to the water's edge. It showed him check over his shoulder at the bank. It showed him position himself directly behind her. And it showed, in clear, time-stamped, GPS and cord resolution, Marcus Webb placing both hands flat against his wife's back and pushing her into the Chattahoochee River. It showed him watch the surface of the water for a moment. And it showed him turn and walk back toward the cabin without looking back once. When the footage ended, Peachtree Street was completely silent for 4 full seconds. Then every camera, every phone, and every voice in that crowd moved at the same time. Fulton County detectives arrived at the Buckhead house at 6:52 p.m. Marcus Webb opened the door, looked at the badges, and stood without speaking before stepping back to allow them inside. He was placed in handcuffs without resistance and read his rights in the living room of the house that Simone Carter had built with her own work and her father's legacy. Keisha Monroe was arrested at her East Atlanta apartment at 8:14 p.m., found sitting on her couch, watching the WSB-TV evening broadcast, leading with footage from the Peachtree Street press conference. She stood up when the knock came, turned off the television, and got her coat. Marcus Webb was indicted on charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and financial fraud. Keisha Monroe was indicted for conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact. Both were held without bail. The trial lasted 9 days. The jury deliberated for 11 hours and returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Marcus Webb was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Keisha Monroe entered a guilty plea midway through trial and received 14 years. At sentencing, Marcus Webb said nothing. He sat with his hands flat on the defense table and stared at the front wall of the courtroom while the sentence was read, and the only movement in his face was a single slow blink when the judge said the word life. Serena Carter did not attend the sentencing. She spent that morning at Westview Cemetery, sitting beside her sister's grave with 2 cups of coffee, one for herself and one placed on the grave, marker the way their father had always done for the people he loved, who could no longer come to the table. She has not spoken publicly since the morning on Peachtree Street, and has declined every interview request since the conviction. Carter Legacy Properties continues to operate under her stewardship. The Carter Family Foundation increased its annual youth housing contribution by 60% in the year Serena took over its administration. She signs every check personally, and at the bottom of each one, in her own handwriting, she writes Simone's name. This story is not only about what Marcus Webb did, it is about what he believed he could do, and who he believed would stop him. He did not underestimate Simone Carter-Webb. He understood exactly how capable she was and exactly what she had built. What he never once accounted for was the woman 4 minutes older, the one who had been watching from the very beginning. The one who loved Simone in the specific and irreplaceable way that only a twin understands, not simply as family, but as a mirror, as a memory, as a piece of yourself walking through the world in a separate body. He planned for everything except Serena, and that single blind spot cost him his freedom, his future, and every dollar he had been willing to take a life for. He did not just lose everything. He handed it all back himself. Before you go, I want to ask you one question. If you had been Serena Carter, holding that footage, watching that man perform grief for the cameras, knowing exactly what he had done to your sister, would you have gone to the police the night Simone died? Or would you have done exactly what Serena did? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if this story held you from the very first second to the very last, wait until you hear what we have coming next week. Subscribe now so you are here when it drops. I will see you then.